Everyone is stupid except me. Exactly like the title. I struggle getting pissed off by everyone because I feel like they're dumb and a bad influence on me. I just graduated high school and recently moved states for a job opportunity. I was good friends with a coworker. At first we got along well, but the more I got to know them, the less I desired wanting to continue my friendship with them. They make impulsive decisions, cheat on their marriage partner, and recently disclosed to me how they can't get their own apartment because they have a bad credit score from so much credit card debt. I want to help, but fear I will lose myself. It's a bad investment of time. Everyone else I meet seems to be a functioning alcoholic and wastes their money. I try to have deep philosophical discussions with those I meet, but either no one is interested or they do this thing where they pretend to be smart but are riddled with logical fallacies. I ask someone why they believe religion is a belief system but not the same for concepts like time or physical science, and they respond with, "It just is." I struggle finding people I want to be friends with because of this, and have spent the last few months completely on my own, just working on myself, my finances, the gym, and studying. But I'm so lonely that I've been really depressed because of it. Life feels pointless because it feels like there's no one who shares the same mindset I do. I know I'm not crazy smart. I often feel like an idiot and still struggle a lot with being impulsive. That's why I can't have impulsive friends, because that environment of peer pressure led me to going through an alcoholic phase of my own that I got out of a few months ago. I was throwing money away on unfulfilling desires that I didn't care about for the sake of saying I have friends. My main goal is to get my DO and use my job's opportunity to expand it into real estate investments. I want to surround myself with people who help push me towards my greatest potential, but I rarely meet anyone like that. Both of my parents are divorced and live alone with little to no friends. I come from a racist country, and a major problem between us was me dating outside my race, to the point I question having to cut them out for the sake of their future grandkids. My mom is amazing and cared so much for me, but would constantly get upset and angry at me for spending time with dumb kids in high school, and to this day will tell me to stop hanging out with someone when I tell her about their problems. One of the few people I respect is my dad. He is incredibly smart and very successful, yet he suffers the same fate of having absolutely no friends and being impossible to live with due to anger issues, which is partially why I moved out. I love him and he is really one of the smartest people I know, but I only have bad memories of him getting upset at me growing up for not understanding things. I swore to myself I would never end up like him, but find myself following his footsteps. I mean no disrespect by the title, but I don't know how else to better phrase my issue. I want to stay friends with people and help them, but am I just compromising my own life? It's really hard for me to meet people who I feel are productive and good influences, but I also don't know if I'm being a cocky asshole who is out of touch with reality. Okay? What a good post. So, let's start with this. So this is someone who says, everyone else is dumb except for me, right? So we see this all over the internet, right? We see this, like, people like to find quotes of these people who are very smart and put them out of context or maybe in context on places like the subreddit I'm very smart, and I want to have deeply philosophical discussions. Everyone around me is impulsive. No one is working towards their goals. I feel very lonely. And how do we respond to this person? Generally speaking, no compassion, right? So on these places like the internet and in life, we say have compassion for all people, except people who think they're smarter than everyone else. That's the one thing that you can say that allows other people to treat you like crap, right? If you've been traumatized by someone else, you deserve compassion. If your parents were narcissistic, you deserve compassion. But if you think you're better than me, screw you. Let's make fun of you. Let's laugh at you, right? That's the one thing. It's kind of interesting. So I really respect this person because this is a hard thing to say, right? It's like hard to say. And even they're self-reflective. They've done some good work. And I think it's amazing that already this person who is an I am very smart person on the rest of the internet would be treated like crap. But already in our community, They've become a little bit more self-reflective. They've started to realize like a little bit about what's going on. And so being very smart or feeling like you're really smart is incredibly isolating, right? And we hear this a lot. It's hard for me to like meet people, like and we make fun of people who think they're smarter than everyone else because they're like, like everyone else like can't debate philosophy and like quantum mechanics and philosophy and stoicism and whatever buzzword you want nowadays. Rick and Morty fans, perfect. So this experience, first of all, let's like start from the top, which is like what this person is essentially talking about is like isolation and an immense amount of isolation and loneliness. And we can also see that this person is making efforts, right? They're trying to meet people. They're trying to be nice. They're like worried though, that if I hang out with someone who's like in credit card debt and cheats on their partner, am I going to wind up like hanging out with the wrong people because, that's not the direction I want to go? And they're like, there's a valid point there, right? So what's going on here? Like, how do you end up in this space? How do you end up in the place where you feel lonely and you also feel like you're smarter than everyone else and you tend to reject everyone around you for not being smart enough? You reject everyone around you because they're not moving you in the direction that you need to go. You want to surround yourself with people who challenge you and like want to push you to growth, right? So how did we get here and how do we get out of it? So let's kind of take a look at this. Okay. So the first thing that I think everyone here noticed, so if you think you're smarter than everyone else, and you're lonely, how do you overcome this? And this is a good point, right? So like the first thing that they kind of say is that you should be careful with who you hang out with, right? So not everyone that you encounter is necessarily going to be worth your time. That's kind of like logical. Not everyone around you is going to be like interested in the same things that you are. So you may not want to invest in relationships. Like that's pretty logical too. But I think there's a lot going on for these people that I think that they don't realize. And essentially what happens is since they don't realize what's going on and they put on a particular air, they get judged very harshly and like receive essentially no compassion. So the first thing going on with this person is conditioning. And this is something that if you've been a part of this community for a while, like I don't need to point this out to you. So this person judges other people for not being good enough. What were they conditioned to do? Right? So if we kind of like talk about their mom, where's the section about their mom? So my mom is amazing and cared for me so much. So this person, you respect her, right? But would constantly get upset and angry at me for spending time with dumb kids. So what does this mean? Your mom taught you to be judgmental. And so you were ingrained, right? Anytime this person tried to make a friend, what did their mom say? They're not the right race. They're going to hold you back. My gifted golden child. They're not the right people to hang out with. They're not the right influence. My golden child. They're not as good as you. This is conditioning. We can see it. Like this person even says like, I want to help. Right? So he wants to help people. He wants to engage with people. I'm assuming it's a he for a second. I don't know why, but he or she wants to help people. Right? So this person wants to help people, but like, what does their mind tell them? Like their mind is just incredibly, incredibly judgmental. So the first thing is that, if we kind of think about like kids who grow up racist, like why are they racist? It's because of what they've been conditioned to be. The second thing here is that this person longs for connection. The main thing that they're feeling is lonely. And when we start to feel lonely, it's that can manifest in all kinds of weird ways. And the loneliness can almost be a protective mechanism. So remember that the things that hurt us in life that are hard to kick are often doing something for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't do them. So our brain is really, really good at figuring out like what's a good deal and what's a bad deal. And if you find yourself stuck in a situation where you're torturing yourself or you feel like you're lonely and you can't make friends, like there's something else going on underneath the surface. So the other thing to kind of point out is we say like, okay, the other reason that I kind of mentioned connection here is they talk about it as well. But, you know, what this person wants is, you know, I try to have deep philosophical discussions. That's what this person really wants. So what they want is the discussion. So they're not saying, I want to read a book. They're not interested in knowledge. Right? What they're interested in is discussion. And they're not able to find people who can engage in discussion. Like, for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to be, they seem to be kind of missing out on this. So there are a couple of things that are like really important here. The next is when we have this sort of system of enforced loneliness and we are judgmental, when we are lonely due to judgmentalness, what's going on? A couple of things, okay? The first is that for people who have problems with self-esteem and wind up lonely, they sometimes will employ the defense mechanism of, I'm gonna reject you before you reject me. Okay? So I'm gonna ask y'all a question. What do you think what this person would do if they found someone who was able to engage in a deep philosophical discussion? Let's say that there was someone who was like a PhD student in philosophy who really knew what they were talking about. What do you think would happen? Would the person engage with them? Right? It's interesting, right? So no one's saying this person would be thrilled and be like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So there could be a really interesting cognitive bias. The only people I see are like functional alcoholics. Like, what? Not everyone out there is a functional alcoholic. Maybe you're hanging out in the wrong places. Like, it could be possible. I'm not saying that you're not encountering functional alcoholics. Like, maybe you're not hanging out at university campuses and stuff like that. But I'd be really, really careful about what you do with what you're looking for. Right? It's very, very terrifying. Because if you're an amateur philosopher who likes to smurf with people who are in credit card debt, and like you meet someone, you're like, because like there's a certain amount of attacking going on here, right? So it's like, I ask why they believe religion is a belief system, but not the same for concepts like physical time or space. It's like, you're just pulling someone into that conversation. It's kind of interesting, right? It's like, by the way, do you think religion is a belief system? And they're like, sure. They're like, what about science? No, like science is fact. Why? Right? And someone saying, sir, this is Wendy's. Exactly. So like, how do you get into these conversations? Like, you usually don't just like open up there, right? So what I'm actually getting is that this person has a deep desire to be challenged and to challenge people in return. Right? It's kind of like, it's interesting here. But I think that what this discussion aspect comes to is actually what this person is really looking for is to challenge other people and for that person to live up to the challenge and in turn to be challenged. Does that make sense? Like, that's what, like, I want to throw something out and I want you to push back and I want you to push back properly. But basically, like, it's like this person is going around in real life and like throwing down to 1v1 mid. It's like they're just showing up places and they're like, hey, let's 1v1 mid. It's like people aren't quite ready for that, right? It's like, this is like real life 1v1 midding. Right? Debate, bro. Yeah. But there's, even though we kind of make fun of this person, right? Like, let's remember that we want to try to be compassionate and understand that what this person is really looking for is to challenge and to be challenged, which in turn, I think comes down to respect. Because what this person really wants is to be respected in a relationship and to respect someone else in a relationship. And this is where some of this stuff comes in, because if you're kind of feeling lonely, you got to be careful, because you could be employing this defense mechanism of, I'm going to reject you before you reject me. What else is going on? When you're lonely and judgmental, option number 2 on the differential diagnosis is we hate in others that which we cannot fix in ourselves. Key. If you find yourself rejecting a particular class of people, there's a decent chance that the reason you reject them, in the vein of screw you specifically, is because of something within yourself, right? So let's kind of look at, it seems like everyone I meet is a functioning alcoholic and wastes their money. Peer pressure led me to going through an alcoholic phase of my own, and I was throwing money away. Does that sound like anyone we know? Right? And this is also like, I also say it in kind of a meme sense, but let's be clear. This is almost a survival mechanism, because if this has happened to you, what is the lesson that your brain is going to learn? Steer clear of functional alcoholics who waste their money, right? Because you got pulled into this once before. It's actually very logical. But at the same time, you got to be very careful, because if you're rejecting a class of people, which is exactly what you yourself suffered from, then like you got to be kind of careful from that, right? Because a lot of that rejection is then, so people will talk about things like projection or displacement or reaction formation. So what do these things mean? So projection is when, if I'm cheating on my spouse, I will be paranoid and I will be thinking like, you're cheating on me, aren't you? You're cheating on me, aren't you? It's like actually coming from me, but I project it out onto other people. The other thing that could happen is displacement, where I'm truly angry with myself for falling for this crap. But I'm taking the anger that I have towards myself and I'm displacing it onto other people. Like those functional alcoholics, those dumbasses, they're such terrible people. And then reaction formation is somewhat similar. So like the best example that I have of reaction formation is the homophobic homosexual. So some people grow up in a particular environment where they are taught to hate something, or they're taught about homosexuality and how homosexuality is bad, and they themselves are homosexual. And so the only way they can manage those feelings is to lash out against other homosexuals. Right? So we hate in others that which we cannot fix in ourselves. So that could be going on here too. Okay. So the next thing is, if you're having trouble engaging in relationships, if you're lonely, so what we hear in this post is what this person wants, right? Like this is where I want to meet people, but no one is interested, or they want to do things where they pretend to be smart, but are riddled with logical fallacies. I don't think they pretend to be smart. I think they, you just engage them in conversations. Maybe they pretend to be smart. Who knows? Maybe they're insecure too. But if you want to have a relationship with someone and your problem is loneliness, a relationship is 2 ways. Right? A relationship goes both ways. So the question is, what do they want? And this is where if you want to have a relationship, you may say okay, I don't want those things. But no relationship is going to be exactly what you want, right? That's not even a relationship. Maybe you're looking for someone, and maybe you're looking for someone who wants the same things you want, which is possible. But I think there's needs to be some kind of acknowledgement if you're lonely about what's the other person's perspective. What do they want from a relationship? And is it impossible for you to engage with someone who doesn't want what you want? Or can you engage with them anyway and maybe give them something that they want? Because maybe if they do that, they'll give you what you want, right? There's an exchange in relationships, which I'm not really getting much of. The interesting thing is that I think that this person does do this. So it's kind of interesting because if you really talk about this example, like good friends with a coworker, at first we got along well, they make impulsive decisions, I want to help them. So we see those elements there of like meeting people where they're at, supporting them in their own challenges, all these kinds of things. But then I think this conditioning and all this other crap gets in the way. So the right stuff is there, right? But there's this weird kind of conditioning where he's been taught to be judgmental or she's been taught to be judgmental. And then like they're maybe afraid of being rejected, and they maybe like see negative parts of themselves in that other person, which causes them to push people away, right? And then we kind of get to the last thing, which is we try to fix our internal problems by surrounding ourselves with the opposite. So this is kind of related to, this point here. But if I am impulsive and, not disciplined and vulnerable to alcoholism, then I think I can fix that by surrounding myself with like PhD students, right? Who are like into philosophy. And there's some truth to this. So you want to be careful. Like, for example, if you're trying to get sober, right? They're like very powerful social capital and community effects. You don't want to hang out with a bunch of people who are actively using if you're trying to get sober. There's a lot of like good reasonableness here. But at the same time, be a little bit careful, because a lot of these problems you're going to take with you, right? Surrounding yourself with people who are like, the opposite of what you are can absolutely have a good influence on you, but it is not going to fix the problem. Ultimately, if you're impulsive and like prone to alcohol, those are things that need to be internally fixed, but internally fixed in a supportive environment. And that's where the environment kind of comes in, right? That's why you have sober houses. Because it's easier to do the internal work when you're externally supported. So I'd absolutely recommend that this person, finds a different company. Like, that's totally fine. Like, if you want to go hang out with PhD students at your local university, go for it. But be careful about, this business over here. Because what you may find is that, your mind may be looking for a way to dismiss them. That's what you have to be super careful about. Because you may be finding some of the stuff that you actually want, but your mind may be dismissing it because deep down it's afraid of like being the stupidest kid in the room, right? And this is where I would start to ask questions like, when your mom, was there anyone that your mom did want you to be friends with? And how did you feel like hanging around them? What was it like being around people who were smarter than you, better than you, faster than you, better looking than you? Because there's a lot of stuff here that I think is conditioning. There's a lot of stuff here that I think you could be like, displacing onto other people. But the truth of the matter is that people who are, feel like they're smarter than everyone else are incredibly lonely. And like, I know that the internet loves to hate on people who think they're smarter than everyone else. But the truth is like, they're just as deserving of our compassion as anyone else, right? We're just being judgmental. And there's just one thing that we find particularly annoying, right? It's like the I'm very smart people and the Karens. And so like, it's just really hard to have compassion for some of these people. And at the same time, I think that this person has done an awesome job, because we start here and everyone's like, screw this person. And then as we get down to the bottom, it's like, yeah, I mean no disrespect by the title. I don't know how to better phrase my issue. They're just being authentic, right? I want to stay with friends, but I'm just, am I compromising my life? It's really hard for me to meet people who I feel are productive and good influences. But I don't know if I'm being a cocky asshole. Like, this is an incredibly like humble, authentic representation of this person's problem. This person is incredibly lonely. And so what do you do if you're in this situation where you genuinely feel like you cannot meet people who like are giving you what you want, cannot challenge you, you don't have mutual respect in a relationship, right? And this, by the way, so like, and we'll get to that in a second. So if you're in this place, I'd start with sort of looking at your conditioning. Where were you taught to think like this? Because chances are there's a lot of judgment in your past. Either in this case, you are like your mom literally told you, don't hang out with that person is stupid and is going to hold you back. Or you were on the receiving end of the judgment, right? Or your mom called you stupid. And so you like learn to call other people stupid. We see this from this person's dad too, where the dad doesn't know how to form relationships. So this person literally was not taught how to form relationships. Like that's a skill that most of us just learn because our parents like have relationships. And so when we're 3 years old and we don't understand what's going on, but my dad has an argument with his best friend and they start yelling at each other and they just ignore me because they're caught up in it, but I'm still watching it, right? It's still getting like laid down in my brain in some way, shape, or form. So this person just was conditioned to think this way. Secondly, they're incredibly lonely, right? They're not looking for knowledge. They're looking for discussion. They want to be challenged. They want to challenge other people. What they're looking for is respect. But respect is mutual. And you can't have mutual respect unless you respect the other person. And what I'm hearing is that when there's judgment, there's not a whole lot of respect. So you're never going to have mutual respect. You're never going to have relationship. You have to start by respecting the other person, right? Like if you want a friend, if you're lonely, you need mutual respect to have friendships. But as long as you're not respecting the other person, then like how's that ever going to happen? Another thing to be careful about is that sometimes we hate in others that which we cannot fix in ourselves. And we understandably want to avoid those kinds of people because they're bad influences. And so we try to surround ourselves with the right people, the opposite. But we can try to surround ourselves with whoever we want to, and those people can absolutely be good influences. But the problems I'm going to carry with me, like, you know, they're going to come with you to some degree. So you've got to work on that. And the last thing to kind of think a little bit about is like, what does the other person want in the relationship? Why don't you ask them? Why does a relationship all have to all be about your needs? So as you start to go through some of these things, as you start to realize your conditioning, as you start to recognize what some of your internal fears may be, maybe you're rejecting them before they get a chance to reject you, right? That could be going on. What actually happens when you meet someone who challenges you? How do you actually respond to that person? Because you may say a couple of things. Maybe you just steer clear of them subconsciously. Or maybe you do all kinds of mental gymnastics to be judgmental towards them, to knock them down a peg when they're better at philosophical discussions than you are. Right? It's very possible. And at the end of the day, I don't think that you have to be lonely if you're in this situation. You really don't. It's going to take some work. It's going to be hard work because this training does not happen overnight, right? Like you don't get to this situation just randomly. You get to this situation when you've got two parents who've been really rough in terms of teaching you how to like form relationships. When you like make friends in this, like when you're 7 and your mom is like, that person isn't smart enough for you. Like that sinks in deep. You've been programmed. So it's hard to undo that. And how do you start? It starts with mutual respect. It starts by thinking a little bit about other people's needs, exploring yourself. And then hopefully you can find what you're looking for. And by all means, like explore outside of your current domain because maybe you just need to go to different places, right? So there's some very practical stuff too. Right? Questions? Yeah, rip gifted kids with parents like that. Absolutely. Someone's asking, how do you deal with conditioning in general beyond recognizing it? So recognizing it is actually like the lion's share of it. So if you trust the yogis from like ancient India, they will say recognizing it is sufficient. So the problem with conditioning is that it's like an invisible monster, right? You need detection. You need like a sentry ward or whatever the law equivalent is. Like you need to be able to detect your enemy to do anything. So the brain is pretty good. The mind is pretty good at like making the right choice. The biggest problem is like a problem of misdiagnosis. So once you figure out what the problem is, and you guys may have seen this on stream. We haven't done interviews a whole lot recently, but you'll kind of see the cathartic moment where someone realizes and then the behavior follows suit. Right? There's even good evidence that shows that there's this thing called the insight trial, which is super fascinating, which looked at the correlation between insight and behavior. So if you want to see behavioral changes, insight has to come first. And then the behavioral changes seem to almost naturally follow. So you can definitely do things to support the behavioral changes. You can operationalize, you can find the right kind of community, you can do different kinds of exercises. But actually, insight is the most important thing. Once you recognize that that is conditioning, then you can intervene with it in the moment. So if I go to, let's say, like a philosophy club, and I'm aware, if I'm on the lookout for these things, and someone shows up there, or even before I go, it's like the day for philosophy club is there, I'm about to get in my car, and then suddenly my mind is like, oh, why don't we just play games? Like, we can go next week. Wait, I thought you were lonely. I thought you wanted deep discussions. Like, why are you suddenly thinking about playing games? Like, where's that thought coming from? Right? And as you begin to realize, like, oh, like, and then you ask yourself the question, how do I feel about going? Like, pick up your car keys, walk out to your car, and then, like, notice that your heart rate is, like, through the roof. You're tachycardic, and you're sweating, and you're just, like, trying to get into a car. Like, what's wrong here? And then you realize, like, something is up. Right? So awareness of conditioning is critical. And then once you become aware of it, then you can sort of realize, like, oh, this is me being afraid that, like, I'm going to be the stupid one in the room. And so am I willing to let that fear take control of me? It's okay if you are. You can say yes. Like, that fear is too much right now. So be it. Or I'm going to set that fear aside and I'm going to try to go. Right? And then you start to condition yourself in other ways. So neurons that fire repeatedly get well grooved, right? So if we want to understand how conditioning works, it's kind of like a game trail in the wilderness. So it starts off with a field of grass that is all the same. And then a mouse runs through the field and tramples a little bit of grass. And then what happens is a rabbit approaches the field and sees, oh, there's one area where the grass is a little bit trampled. So the rabbit runs across the field. Rabbit's bigger than a mouse, so it tramples a little bit more grass. And then there's something like a small deer that walks across it because it sees an area that's trampled. And then, like, a bigger deer crosses it, and then another rabbit, and then another mouse, and then suddenly you've got a game trail. That's the way your neurons work. So when you're told by your mom over and over and over again that these people are not good enough for you, you will start to internalize that. That is a well-grooved set of neurons. Neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So when you start to think in a particular way, all those neurons will get connected. And then all you have to do is trigger one neuron and it'll trigger everything down the path. So how do you start to do that? It's the same way you make a new game trail. So in a given moment in your life, there's going to be an easy path, which you've walked 1,000 times before. Or there's a hard path. You have to walk through the grass, and that's going to require more energy. It's going to be more difficult. You recognize that, right? That's like facing that fear in the moment that you're going to go to the philosophy club meeting. And so actually going to the meeting is creating a new game trail. We're not even at a game trail. We're walking through the tall grass, and it requires way more effort than going down the game trail. The interesting thing, though, is the second time you go to the philosophy club meeting, it's going to be easier because now there's a little bit of trampled grass. And then you do that a second time and a third time and a fourth time. And then suddenly by the end of it, and I've seen this a ton in people who are alcoholics, for example, 2 years, 3 years into sobriety, they don't even want to drink. So their neurons have been literally rewired. They've been reconditioned. But it all starts with awareness, right? It all starts with awareness.